Well, my life today, what has happened during this close to 2 years that the book has come out, it's been overwhelming, just the number of places it's been published and also just how it's been received by people. It has taken me to a lot of places that I didn't think I'll be able to go to. A lot of people have read it, ranging from kids who are 12, 13. Universities have adopted it as courses, so it's kept me on the road and constantly busy. But I think it really shows that this is what I wanted to do with the book. It really shows that the book touches people deeply, and they take the story very personally to heart and make references to their own lives, what they were doing. And I think it has been quite interesting for me to see that. Well, I decided to go back to Sierra Leone over the course of almost 2 months separate apart, but to really just go back and go to the places that I grew up as a kid, to the places that I also fought as a child soldier, and just sort of, I felt like I needed to do that to come to terms with a lot of things, because I've been to Sierra Leone before, but I've kind of not really gone to these places. And I wanted to really go there to experience it, to see how we feel again. But also I went because I feel that the writing of my book was not only to raise awareness, but to also do certain things, practical things in Sierra Leone that benefits people who haven't been as fortunate as I've been. So when I went back, I was able to build a school near the village that I grew up, and I was able to get from scratch to finish, where about 200-300 kids, a primary school that attend the school, that will no longer walk 5 miles to school. So I was able to do this out of my own money, because I feel that it's not just about awareness, it's also about the responsibility that I owe to this country. But emotionally it's very difficult to be there, because I walk from Matrujon, which is where I was born, to my grandmother's village, which is 6 miles. And that walk had a lot of emotional things for me and psychological things for me, because it's a place that I walked as a kid going to school, but it's a place that I first encountered a war and saw the massacre that had really happened. And so it's very difficult to be there, but as I stayed in Sierra Leone longer, it became easier to access these places and to be in the same environment that I now have 3 experiences for me. Yes, I did come to some kind of closure. Definitely. When I arrived first, it wasn't easy. I had a lot of nightmares. I had a lot of I couldn't sleep very well. I was quite restless. But the longer I stayed there, and the more I went, I went in May, and then I went in July, and so the 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 second time I went around was much easier than the first time I went in May. And so I think as I go, the places begin to take a different shape for me. For example, when I was walking trees that once, where people had been tied and shot, where it was not pleasant to see, now it's fresh and it's growing, it has green leaves. So I think for me that shows the hope and the possibility of change that had occurred, even with nature, that seemed threatened at some point. Yes, at some point in my life, I definitely want to go and live in Sierra Leone, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing there as well, because I want to contribute to what I can. Regardless of what happened there, it's my home. I love it dearly, and when I'm there are certain feelings that I get, just the simplicity. And I feel much safer in Sierra Leone than I do in New York, for one simple reason, because in Sierra Leone, you don't have to convince anyone that violence is bad for them. Everyone knows because they've been touched by it, so people resist from it. This is not to say they're not violent, things are not happening in Sierra Leone. Whereas in New York, people still have some fascination with it because they haven't been touched by it. So I love going back because of those things, the simplicity. I also have, family members there. I have my cousins from my uncles. So I've been able to find aunts and uncles from extended family circles. So that I also go to keep that family there. I have a family abroad in the United States now, but I also have a family abroad. So I'm in between these two worlds. So I always live there and in Sierra Leone, in the United States and Sierra Leone. Both have become my homes. Well, my immediate project for the future is that apart from building the school through this organization, I'm creating a foundation, which we have a deductible status in the United States, and it's called the Ismael Beah Foundation. And the idea of it is to really give educational scholarships to kids to be able to go to school, to be able to do vocational training, basically for people to do other things with their lives. Because I believe that my life changed because I went to school. I was able to discover that there's something else that I knew how to do, with my mind, and so I want to provide that opportunity for kids. And right now we're actually in the selecting process of selecting kids from various secondary and primary schools that we're going to fund through this organization for the entire 1 year of school, and how they perform. We continue to support them, and we continue to maybe even support them until university. So that's the plan. Yes, I also intend to go to law school in 2009, fall of 2009. Intend to start law school to study international law and international affairs. So we shall see how that all goes. Everything else that I'm doing. Well, I've always wanted to study law because for me, I feel that I've had a practical experience by being in the war, by seeing what happens when the rule of law doesn't work, how human life becomes meaningless, how people are not held accountable for destroying it. So for me, I want to study international law because I feel like strengthening certain international legal standards can actually solve some of these problems by holding people accountable who sell guns into these places, by holding people accountable who recruit children, by people who violate other people's rights. So for me, it's really finding the sort of the academic thing to back what I already know, which is that I've had the experience. And I want to work in this field, not only to write about it in literature setting, but also to be in the judicial part of it as well. So. Yes, my intention is I want to write a fiction next, a fiction book next, and I will write some more, but my next book will be a fiction, and I've already started thinking about it, and I know I won't share the idea because it's very young at this point, but it will definitely be set in Sierra Leone because that's the landscape that I'm more intimate with, and so yes. Well, in Sierra Leone we have lots of languages, and my mother tongue before I learned how to speak English is Mende, and then I learned Creole and various other languages. And so when I was writing, and whenever I write, I try to find the English equivalent of those languages because I grew up in a very oral tradition storytelling culture, and also my language is very poetic. So when I try to find the English equivalent of this language, that's when my writing becomes what it is. For example, when we speak about things in Mende, we don't just call the object, we call the components of the object. If you say a ball, like a soccer ball, in English it's just a ball. But if you translate it from Mende, it means a vessel that carries air. So I think I rely upon these kinds of things to really bring people to this landscape. When you say night came suddenly, the way you say it in Mende is basically the sky rolled over and changed its sides. So you get that very strong and raw visual imagery that is also very new, the way it's described. So I rely upon this oral tradition a lot in this language to really find a new vocabulary, a new language to describe this place that is very foreign to a lot of people. My next work, I don't think there will be one hero. I think there will be several people because my next work, I'm basically going to tackle the issue of family, what it means to have a family in post-conflict Sierra Leone, where a lot of traditions have been tested and failed, where, there is no longer a general moral and value and fundamental standards that go across culture. So how do you raise a child there? How do you raise a child in that context? How do you raise a child that had seen their father killed? And how do you tell them that violence. So these are the difficulties that are in Sierra Leone now. What do you insert in your child? How do you explain to your child that sees somebody who's amputated and ask you why is that person like that, you know. So this is the kind of stuff that I want to tackle in my next piece. What is happening now in Sierra Leone after the war? How do people learn to live together? How do people even learn to define what childhood is? Because during the war, the definition of childhood changed, because children, innocent, was no longer regarded because they were forced to do horrible things. So a lot of adults changed their perception of children. So how do you reshape that again? How do you allow people to look at children and see children, but not be reminded of the past? So this is some of the things that I want to tackle in my next work. Ambassador for UNICEF is also what is keeping me on the road traveling. I have one of the things that I've done for UNICEF is go to a place like Jamaica where there are a lot of gang violence in Kingston, with young people with guns and things like that. So I was able to go there, and they would allow me to come into these places because of my experience. They feel a kinship where UNICEF workers will not be able to go. They will allow me to come in and talk to them. So I've realized that there's also that, that sort of opportunity that I have to talk to people who perhaps other societies have sort of disbelieved can be negotiated or spoken with at all. So I'm doing this kind of stuff, and also we do a lot of research, trying to find ways to engage policymakers and governments. One of the things that we're doing through Human Rights Watch is trying to make it a requirement for countries when they give military aid to other countries that they shouldn't have child soldiers. So we do research and continue this advocacy work, and to also try to reach people on the ground. And lastly, one thing that I'm trying to do, which is a joint effort with UNICEF and UN, is to create a sort of association of people who have come out of this war doing well. Musicians, former child soldiers like Emmanuel Jal, who lives in the UK,
Yes.
China Ketsetsi, who is in Denmark, Grace, who lives in Boston, to find all of us who are musicians, writers, painters, to sort of have an association that allows us to show people the diversity of the success of this rehabilitation, but also to go to these rehabilitation centers and empower the kids that are there to know that we had once been here, but here is what happened to us, to see that possibility. So that's also something that we're going to try and launch perhaps in November. In the case of child soldiers, there have been some advances. For example, now you have in the International Criminal Court somebody like Charles Taylor who's been held, and one of the charges is recruiting children, and a fellow from the Congo as well, Lubanga. And so you have these things that are happening. But what is happening that to develop a body of international law is very slow, as opposed to the rate at which children are recruited. So sometimes it seems as if nothing is happening, but a lot of things have happened. Now anyone can be prosecuted for recruiting children. Before it was only governments. Now even if you're not a government army, you're a rebel army, you can be held accountable. There's no longer a non-state versus a state actor. So these laws have come in they're operating quite a bit, and we have countries that are willing to finance certain initiatives in various countries, or to lend their political weight on certain places. More needs to be done, but a lot has been done. Compared to where I was when I first came out of war in 1996 to where it is now, a lot of development has happened.
Thank you, Ismael, for your time.